I stared at my phone, reading the text for the third time. You're not quite a match for this crowd. Maybe sit this year out. My sister Elena had just uninvited me from Thanksgiving. Me. The one she calls when rent is due at 2 in the morning. The one who approved every payment, every bailout, every crisis fund for the past 5 years. See, here's what Elena doesn't know. I'm not just her little sister. I'm the trustee of her $92,000 trust fund, and right now, my finger is hovering over a button that could change everything. So tell me, what would you do? People call me a lot of things. Sweet, reliable, too nice for my own good. But the label that stings most is the one my sister uses. Just a caregiver. Like what I do is small. Like sitting beside someone's grandmother as she forgets her own name isn't a form of love. Like feeding and bathing and reading bedtime poems to people at the edge of life is somehow less valuable than closing business deals in a corner office. But I love my work. I genuinely do. I love helping people feel human when everything else is falling apart. Still, I won't lie. It wears on you, especially when you go home to family and realize you're the only one who sees value in what you do. My sister Elena Park is the star of our family. Always has been. She's 32, brilliant, beautiful, with a resume that reads like a Forbes feature article. She works in fintech at a startup in downtown Seattle, lives in a high-rise apartment in Capitol Hill, and drives a car I couldn't afford on 2 years of my salary. Her fiancé Luke works in tech consulting and wears watches that cost more than my monthly rent. At Sunday family dinners, Elena is the sun everyone orbits around. Her latest promotion, her wine preferences from that boutique vineyard in Woodinville, her new Pilates studio in Fremont. Meanwhile, I get the polite questions. So, are you still doing that nurse stuff? Or, that must be so emotionally draining, dear. It doesn't matter how many times I correct them. I'm a caregiver, not a nurse. It doesn't matter that I'm proud of my work at Sunrise Care Community in Ballard. To them, it's just a phase I forgot to outgrow. What nobody talks about at those dinners is the trust fund. Years ago, when Elena hit a rough patch after a failed startup and racked up serious credit card debt, it was our grandfather who stepped in. He'd built a small but successful hardware business in Georgetown, saved carefully his whole life, and he wanted to make sure his grandchildren had stability. But here's the thing. He made me the trustee. Not Elena, me. He said I was the responsible one, the one who understood the value of a dollar. Elena never even asked how it worked. She just assumed I'd handle it. And I did. When she moved to New York for grad school, I approved the payments. When she needed a lump sum to buy into that co-working space, I said yes. When she wanted to take a healing sabbatical in Bali after a bad breakup, I covered half the resort costs without hesitation. $92,000 sat in that account, managed by me, accessed by her, and appreciated by no one. She never said thank you, but she always smiled like she expected it. Like money just appeared when she needed it. Like magic. Like weather. I never minded, or at least, I told myself I didn't. But this year was different. This year, I'd lost one of my longtime clients, Mrs. Chin, a woman I'd cared for through 3 years of Alzheimer's. Her apartment felt empty afterward. My apartment felt emptier. I needed Thanksgiving. I needed the noise, the bad jokes from Uncle Ray, the smell of my mom's experimental cranberry sauce that nobody ever ate. So when my phone buzzed on that Monday afternoon in November and I saw Elena's name, I smiled instinctively. Maybe she was calling to confirm what dish I should bring. Maybe she wanted to coordinate travel. Instead, I got this. Hey, Vanessa, with Luke's parents coming, we're trying to keep things formal. Maybe it's best if you sit this year out. I blinked at the screen. Then another message appeared. It's nothing personal. You know I love you. You're just not quite a match for this crowd. Not quite a match. I sat on the bus holding my phone like it had just slapped me. Around me, traffic moved. The world kept spinning. But I felt frozen. Not angry. Not yet. Just small. The way I used to feel in high school when Elena showed up to pick me up in her first car, looking like she belonged in a magazine while I stood there in hand-me-down jeans. That night, I didn't respond to her text. Instead, I opened my laptop and logged into the trust fund portal. $92,000. All of it right there. And for the first time in 5 years, I started to wonder, what if I stopped saying yes? Thanksgiving Day arrived cold and gray, typical Seattle November weather. Rain tapped against my apartment window in a rhythm that felt like mockery. I worked a half shift that morning at sunrise, helping Mrs. Addison with breakfast, changing linens, reading her passages from a book she'd loved before dementia took most of her words. When I got home around 2 in the afternoon, I was still wearing my scrubs. I heated up leftover lasagna in the microwave, poured it onto a paper plate, and lit a single candle on my kitchen counter. My attempt at making this feel like a holiday. It didn't work. My phone sat face down for most of the evening. I didn't want to see it. The photos, the captions, the parade of polished smiles pretending to be warmth. But curiosity is a cruel thing. Around 7, I picked it up, and there it was, Elena's Instagram story. Photo 1, the dining table, perfectly set with gold cutlery, crystal wine glasses, a roasted turkey on a wooden carving board that probably cost more than my monthly groceries. Everything gleaming under soft pendant lights. Photo 2, our parents, arms around Elena and Luke, all 4 of them, grinning like they were modeling for a holiday catalog. My mom wore the pearl earrings Grandpa gave her. My dad had his good blazer on. They looked happy, genuinely happy. Photo 3, a selfie, Elena in a cream silk blouse, chin tilted just right, Luke's arm draped around her waist. The caption read, "Grateful for those who inspire me to rise higher every day." I stared at that line until my vision blurred. No mention of me, no empty chair with a "We miss you" caption, no subtle acknowledgement that someone was missing, just a perfect evening, perfectly staged, perfectly complete without me. And the worst part, nobody asked where I was, not even my mom. I set the phone down. My hands were shaking, not from anger, from something colder, something that felt like waking up from a long sleep and realizing you've been dreaming someone else's life. I thought about last year. Elena forgot to pay rent and called me crying at 2 in the morning. I wired her $1,500 before I even asked what happened, or the time she needed a mental health sabbatical after her breakup with that venture capitalist. I approved 3 months of trust fund disbursements without hesitation. $8,000 total. She never told me if it helped, or the Bali trip. She said it would change her life. Healing retreat, yoga at sunrise, finding herself. I covered the flight and half the resort. $4,000. She came back the same, polished, entitled, still blind to the person making her lifestyle possible. I opened my laptop and logged back into the trust fund portal. I'd been thinking about this all week, weighing every angle, every consequence. I didn't want revenge. That wasn't who I am. I just didn't want to carry her anymore. The balance still read $92,000, untouched since her last payout 3 months ago. I navigated to account settings, hands steadier now, mind clearer than it had been in years. There was an option I'd never noticed before. Transfer trustee responsibilities. I clicked it. A new page loaded. It listed legal firms in the Seattle area that specialized in wealth management and fiduciary services. Neutral, professional, no emotional ties, no guilt, just policy and procedure. I selected Barrett and Associates, a firm in downtown Seattle with good reviews and a reputation for running things by the book. They would administer the fund exactly as Grandpa's trust document outlined. No more late-night phone calls. No more just this once requests. If Elena wanted money, she'd have to submit formal documentation, justification, proof of need. She'd have to explain herself in writing to strangers. The form required a digital signature. 1 line, 1 click. I read the disclaimer twice. By transferring trustee duties, you relinquish all administrative control and financial access authority. I thought about that Thanksgiving table, the empty space where I should have been, the caption about people who inspire, her to rise higher. I thought about 5 years of yes, 5 years of being invisible. I signed. The page refreshed. Transfer initiated. Beneficiary will be notified within 48 hours. I closed the laptop and sat back. My apartment was quiet except for the rain. The candle had burned down to nothing. My lasagna was cold, but for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to peace. Not because I'd hurt her, but because I'd finally stopped pretending that loving someone meant letting them walk all over you. 6 days later, my phone buzzed. It was Elena. "Hey, something's wrong with the account. Did you mess something up?" I stared at the message. Didn't respond. A minute later, another one came. "Actually, forget it. Can you fix it now? We're on a tight schedule." That was more like her. Assumption. Entitlement. No, please. No acknowledgement. Just fix it. I left the message unread. I was folding laundry at work. That felt more important. The calls started that afternoon. First from Elena, then from my mom. I let them all go to voicemail. I wasn't avoiding them out of spite. I just had nothing left to say that hadn't already been said in silence. By evening, my mom finally got through. I answered after the third ring. "Vanessa," she began, voice soft and urgent, the tone she used when she wanted something. "Your sister is really upset." "She'll be okay," I said lightly, stirring soup for Mrs. Addison on the stove. "She said the trust account isn't working. There's a payment she has to make for the wedding venue, and it's blocked or something." I replied, watching steam curl up from the pot. "Did you do something to it?" Mom asked. There it was, the assumption. That I must have made a mistake. That responsible, reliable Vanessa had somehow broken something. "I didn't do anything to it," I said calmly. I simply stepped back. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Sweetheart, Elena's in a tight spot. Can you please just fix this? Help her out. You always do." I took a deep breath. "She told me I wasn't a good fit for her world, Mom. I'm just giving her the space she asked for." "Vanessa," she sighed, exasperated. "Don't be dramatic." I didn't answer. Because I wasn't being dramatic. I was being honest, for the first time in my life. The next morning, Elena showed up at Sunrise Care Community. I was in the staff lounge folding linens when the door swung open. Too fast. Too loud. "Vanessa," I said instinctively, turning. She stood there in a fitted navy blazer, heels too high for linoleum floors, hair pinned back in a sleek bun like she'd just walked out of a board meeting. Her eyes locked on mine. I saw panic disguised as anger. "You need to fix this," she snapped. "Now." Behind her, a few of my coworkers peeked around the corner. We weren't used to drama here. The most excitement we usually had was someone raising their voice over bingo. I calmly set the towels down. "What are you doing here, Elena?" "You're ruining everything," she hissed, stepping closer. "Do you even realize what you've done? The venue canceled our reservation. The caterer wants deposits we can't send. I had to explain to Luke's parents why we suddenly don't have access to our budget." "I didn't ruin anything," I said quietly. "I just stopped protecting you." She blinked. The words seemed to hit her differently than she expected. I continued, keeping my tone even. "I worked 2 jobs to make sure you never had to struggle. I managed your fund, paid your bills when you weren't looking, filled in all the gaps so your perfect little world never cracked." Her face flushed red. "I never asked you to do that." "No," I said, voice firmer now. "You just expected me to." She opened her mouth to argue, then stopped. Her jaw tightened. I stepped closer. "Do you remember when you called me just a caregiver? When you told me I didn't belong at Thanksgiving because I wouldn't match the vibe?" Her expression shifted. She didn't deny it. She couldn't. "Why didn't you just tell me you were upset?" she asked, softer now, like the wind had dropped out of her sails. I stared at her for a long moment. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Someone's phone buzzed in another room. Life kept moving around us. "Because every time I tried to speak," I said slowly, "you were already talking." The room went still. Elena's shoulders sagged. The armor she always wore, the confidence, the polish, it cracked, just a little, but enough. "I didn't mean to make you feel small," she whispered. I didn't flinch. You didn't make me feel small, Elena. You just never saw how big I already was. For a second, neither of us said anything. We stood there in the silence, not as perfect sister and flawed sister, but as two women finally seeing each other clearly. Behind me, the microwave beeped. In another room, someone coughed. Life moved on, indifferent to our private reckoning. "I'll work it out with the legal firm," Elena said quietly, almost to herself. "You'll have to," I replied gently. "They won't give you special treatment." She nodded, eyes cast down. For the first time in years, maybe ever, she looked like someone navigating the world without a safety net. Vulnerable, uncertain, human. "Vanessa," she said, pausing at the door without turning around. "I never wanted to hurt you." "I know," I said. "But you still did." She left. The door swung shut behind her. And this time, I didn't follow. I didn't call after her. I didn't try to fix it. I just stood there, hands still warm from folding towels, heart somehow lighter than it had been in years. Not because I'd won, but because I'd finally stopped pretending I hadn't lost something too. 2 weeks later, I hosted my own Thanksgiving. A little late on the calendar, but right on time for my heart. I set up a folding table in my living room, covered it with a thrift store tablecloth, and arranged 7 mismatched chairs around it. No fancy wine glasses, no silk napkins, just the people who actually saw me. Mrs. Addison's daughter brought homemade apple pie. Darlene from work showed up with sweet potato casserole and zero judgment about my small apartment. My neighbor James, who once fixed my leaky faucet at midnight, arrived with a laugh big enough to fill the whole room. There were 7 of us total. Some had lost family. Some had been forgotten by them. Some, like me, had simply chosen not to chase invitations that came with conditions. We ate, we told stories, we laughed so hard the pie nearly slid off the table. Before dinner, I'd set out place cards, names written carefully by hand. Something Elena would have called too sentimental, too much. But to me, it felt exactly right. About halfway through the evening, I slipped into the kitchen to refill water glasses. That's when I noticed it. A letter slid under my apartment door. Elena's handwriting on the envelope. I brought it inside, but didn't open it right away. I let it sit beside the bread rolls while conversation swirled around me. Later, after everyone had gone and the dishes were soaking in the sink, I curled up on the couch and opened it. "Vanessa, I've spent a lot of time thinking, probably more than I ever have. I confused value with image. I thought worth came from polish, from performance. But the truth is, you were giving me more than I ever earned. You were holding my world together, and I didn't even look at the hands doing the holding. I'm sorry, not just for the dinner, for all of it, for being blind, for making you small so I could feel bigger. You deserved more than silence. I hope someday you'll let me try again. Not as someone who needs saving, but as a sister who wants to see you." I read it twice. Then I folded it carefully and placed it in the back of my bookshelf. Not thrown away, not put on display, just kept. Because sometimes closure doesn't come in grand gestures. It comes in quiet apologies and the choice to hold peace instead of power. The next morning, I posted a photo on Instagram. The table from the night before, empty plates, smudged glasses, napkins folded into little triangles. Nothing glamorous, just honest. The caption was simple. "I may be just a caregiver, but I've cared better than most ever could." I didn't need their table anymore. I'd built my own. Sometimes the people who love us the most are the ones who forget to see us. And sometimes the bravest thing we can do is stop waiting for permission to matter. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family or undervalued for the work you do, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and share your story. You're not alone in this. And remember, your worth isn't defined by someone else's acknowledgement. Hit that subscribe button for more real stories about finding your voice, setting boundaries, and building the life you actually deserve. You matter. Don't ever forget that.
If only you were a son, this embarrassment wouldn't have happened. My father's voice slammed against the walls of our living room, shaking the DNA envelope clenched in his fist. His face was red with fury. His words cut deeper than any test result ever could. My name is Janelle, and from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever stood in a room full of people who raised you, only to realize none of them had ever truly accepted you? My mother didn't defend me. She didn't even flinch. Instead, she crossed her arms, leaned back in her chair, and smirked. I always knew, she said coolly. She doesn't look like us. She doesn't feel like us. I mean, look at her. Quiet, awkward, too soft to belong in this family. The room buzzed with shock. My brothers looked at me like I was a ghost. Like the idea of me being different suddenly explained every slight, every exclusion, every time I was treated like a stranger in my own house. And still, I didn't speak. I didn't scream. I didn't ask why a 23andMe kit suddenly gave them permission to unravel my entire life. I stood there, silent. Not because I was broken, but because I was listening. I was watching the way my father clutched the paper like it was some holy truth. The way my mother's eyes darted, not at me, but at her purse, resting just beneath the table. That's when something shifted inside me. A hunch, a flicker, a thread of truth they weren't telling. So while they kept talking, debating whose shame I stepped back, knelt down, and unzipped the side pocket of her bag, and pulled out papers. Not folded, not hidden, just waiting. What I found wasn't a surprise. It was a confirmation. Birth records. Dates that didn't add up. A sealed hospital bill in my father's name, dated 3 months before I was even born. The moment he saw what I was holding, my father's voice caught in his throat. He froze. The red drained from his face. His grip on the DNA envelope loosened. He looked like a man who had just seen a ghost walk in through the front door, and it was me. "What is that?" he asked, but his voice was barely a whisper now. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My mother's eyes widened. Her smirk vanished, because she knew what I'd found, and I knew she never expected me to find it. For the first time in that house, I wasn't the quiet girl. I wasn't the soft one. I wasn't the mistake. I was the one holding their truth, and I wasn't about to let it go. They had used that test to erase me, but what they didn't know was, I had the kind of truth that couldn't be swabbed out of a cheek. I didn't storm out. I walked out slowly, with the envelope in one hand and their secrets in the other. That was the last time they saw me as weak. Because the next time they heard my name, it would be in a courtroom. And this time, I wouldn't be the one on trial. They always treated me like I was a stranger wearing their last name. Growing up, I didn't know what love from my parents felt like, only tolerance. I learned early that silence was safer than questions, that speaking up got you labeled too sensitive, while obedience earned you nothing. I watched my brothers get celebrated for the bare minimum, passing a math test, washing their own dishes, surviving football tryouts. Meanwhile, I brought home straight A's, won regional writing contests, kept to myself, and still got told I was taking up too much space. My mother rarely touched me. No hugs. No softness. Only criticism. She'd tell guests, "Janelle's a little odd. She's quiet. Just different." As if I wasn't right in the room. And my father? He treated me like a missed opportunity. Like every time he looked at me, all he saw was a failed dream, a daughter instead of the son he'd clearly wanted. By the time I was 12, I knew the rules of the house. Never correct my father. Never speak when mom's friends were over. Don't expect anyone to clap for your achievements. Still, I tried. God, I tried. I made flashcards for my brother's exams. Cooked dinner when mom needed a break. Did the laundry, cleaned the house, volunteered for everything. I thought that if I worked hard enough, maybe one day they'd say, "We're proud of you." But that day never came. The few times I confronted them about their favoritism, their silence when I needed them, I got called dramatic, selfish, ungrateful. It always ended the same way, my father yelling, my mother rolling her eyes, and me retreating to my room, swallowing tears like pills. I never truly understood why they treated me like that. Until the DNA envelope. Until that smirk on my mother's face. Until those hospital records that told a story no one had ever dared to speak. They'd always known. I wasn't just the disappointment. I was the reminder of a mistake, of something messy, of something they'd hidden, and I was the living, breathing proof. And yet they kept me, not out of love, out of image, out of obligation, out of fear that someone would start asking questions. But the irony? I never wanted to expose them. I never wanted revenge. Not until they tried to erase me first. That night, after I left the living room, I sat in the kitchen in the dark. I reread the hospital bill again and again. The dates, the names, the patient ID. It wasn't just a financial record. It was a map to the moment the lie began. My father wasn't at my birth, because he wasn't supposed to be. And my mother, she hadn't just lied to him. She'd lied to everyone. They built their shame into a story and cast me as the villain. But they forgot something. The quiet ones? We remember everything. And now I had proof, not just of what they did, but who they really were. And if they thought I was done, they were about to learn what a daughter they discarded can do. I didn't sleep that night. My mind was a looping reel of every strange moment from childhood that suddenly made sickening sense. Like the way my mother flinched when a stranger once said I looked nothing like her. Or how my father never spoke about my birth. He told long, winding stories about the day my brothers were born, how he cried when he held them, how the nurse joked that they had his exact nose. But when it came to me, silence. At school, other kids talked about how their moms packed notes in their lunchboxes. Mine packed silence, indifference, a bottle of water, maybe a bruised banana. And when I asked her about it once, she said, "Be grateful I didn't forget." I used to think I was crazy, that I was imagining the distance, that maybe I was too needy, too sensitive, too different.
But now?
I realized the truth. I wasn't different by nature. I was being pushed out on purpose. The birth records I found in her bag weren't just from a hospital I didn't recognize. They were dated 3 weeks before the date on my official birth certificate. And the father's name listed? Unknown. The lie started the moment I was born. I spent all night researching the hospital. It was in another city, 2 hours away. A small private maternity center, shut down years ago. But digital records still existed. And with a little digging, I found a list of medical staff on call that week. One name jumped out immediately, Dr. Harwood. The same last name as the man I once caught my mother arguing with in a supermarket parking lot when I was 15. She told me it was an old debt collector. I believed her, but my gut had never forgotten that moment. So I followed the thread. And with every click, the knot tightened. Dr. Harwood wasn't just a name. He was a well-respected OBGYN who practiced in 3 clinics over 25 years. I found a photo. He looked like me. Brown eyes, high cheekbones, same dimple on the right cheek when he smiled. I stared at that photo for a long time. My hand trembled on the mouse. The screen glowed like it was daring me to accept the truth. And I did. I realized, in a single breathless second, why my mother smirked when the DNA results came out. She knew my father wasn't my biological parent. She had known for over 2 decades and said nothing. Instead, she let him carry the bitterness of a child he didn't believe was his. She let me carry the weight of that resentment every day of my life. And when the test came back inconclusive on paternal match, she seized it like a weapon. But here's the twist. It wasn't my father's rage that exposed the truth. It was her arrogance. She'd kept the paperwork like a trophy. She never thought I'd go looking, but I did. And I wasn't done. If they wanted to play with identity, fine. But I would pull every thread. I would follow every clue, find every lie they hid, and bring it into the light. They made me question my place in this family. Now it was their turn to feel like the outsider. Because blood doesn't make a family. But betrayal? That makes enemies. I didn't rush. That's the thing about real revenge. It's not loud. It doesn't shout. It waits, sharp and silent, until the perfect moment. I started by ordering a certified copy of my original birth certificate. Not the one my parents gave me, the one they used to enroll me in school. I went through the state health department and requested the record using the hospital name I found, Ridgeview Women's Medical Center. A week later, The envelope arrived. And when I opened it, everything fell into place. Date of birth: April 2nd. Mother: Evelyn Carter. Father: left blank. And there it was again. Attending physician: Dr. Malcolm Harwood. I stared at the document like it was a mirror. I wasn't angry.
Not yet.
I was quiet, focused. I scanned it, saved it, and locked the hard copy in a drawer. Then, I called Dr. Harwood's office. I didn't tell them who I was. I asked if he was still practicing. They told me he'd retired 2 years ago. I asked if they could forward a letter to him. They agreed. That night, I wrote it all down. Dear Dr. Harwood, I believe you were the attending physician at Ridgeview on April 2nd, 1997. I believe my mother is Evelyn Carter. I have reason to believe you knew her. I'm not asking for anything except truth. If you're willing to speak, I'd like to meet. Not for confrontation, just for closure.
Janelle.
I mailed the letter. And then I waited. While I waited, I worked on part 2 of the plan. My mother's arrogance had always been her weakness. She flaunted control, loved being one step ahead. But she'd gotten sloppy, confident that I was still the same quiet girl who swallowed pain instead of fighting back. So I started pulling threads where she couldn't see. First, I contacted a cousin on my father's side, Aunt Lydia's daughter, Tara. She was the only one in the family who'd ever shown me warmth. Asked if she'd ever heard anything strange. She hesitated, then said softly, "There were rumors. Mom said your parents had a rough patch before you were born, that your dad moved out for a while." That was it. That was the crack in the wall. They'd separated. Briefly. And when he came back, my mother was already pregnant. It all made sense. He came back out of guilt, maybe obligation. But doubt always festered underneath. And my mother, rather than admitting what happened, used that doubt as a weapon. She let him simmer in resentment. Let him believe I wasn't his. Maybe he was. Maybe he wasn't. But she fed that bitterness and let it rot into rage. And that rage turned into the life I lived. Years of distance.
Coldness.
Words like, "If only you were a son, stop being dramatic, be more like your brothers." Now I was done hiding. My plan wasn't to scream at them. It was to expose them. Let the family see who they really were. Let their world unravel, not with fire, but with facts. Because people like my mother and father, they don't fear confrontation. They fear truth. And I was about to give it to them. 1 page at a time. Dr. Harwood replied. 2 weeks after I sent the letter, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't pick up, but something told me I should. "Janelle?" the voice asked, older, steady, cautious. "Yes," I said, my throat suddenly dry. "This is Malcolm Harwood. I got your letter." I sat down slowly. "Thank you for calling." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Your mother was a patient. A complicated one." I swallowed hard. "I think I'm her complication." He let out a low sigh, like he'd been waiting years to exhale. I suspected this call might come one day. We met the next weekend at a coffee shop 2 towns over. Neutral ground. He looked like a man who had made peace with his regrets. Soft eyes. Careful words. But when I told him the timeline, my questions, what I'd found, he didn't deny anything. She was desperate. Said she didn't want to raise a child alone. She was angry with your father, but she didn't want a broken home. She left with a lie, and when she came back, she was pregnant.
He looked at me sadly.
I thought about reaching out, but I didn't want to disrupt your life. I assumed she'd told the truth by now. She didn't, I said quietly. He nodded. "I'm sorry." He offered a DNA test. I accepted. He paid for it himself. 2 days later, the results came in. 99.8% match. And just like that, my world shifted again, but this time I was ready. Now I had everything. I didn't go to them. Not yet. Instead, I printed every document. The hospital record, the certified birth certificate, the DNA result from Harwood, and the scanned envelope from the original test, the one my father had waved in my face. Then I mailed it all to one person. My grandmother. My father's mother. The only woman who ever looked at me like I was more than an obligation. She called me 3 hours after the package arrived. "Janelle," she said, her voice trembling. "Come over."
Now.
I did. And I walked into a living room full of people. My aunts, uncles, cousins. Even Tara was there. My grandmother stood with a file in her hands, shaking with fury. "They lied," she said. "To all of us." My parents arrived 30 minutes later. My father entered first, his posture stiff and defensive. My mother followed, arms folded tight, already fuming. "What is this?" he snapped. "Some kind of show?" Grandma didn't yell. She simply held up the paper. "You owe this girl your apology." And then some. My mother tried to speak, but the room turned cold. "You let us treat her like an outsider for 25 years, one uncle said, voice trembling. "You watched us push her away, and you said nothing." My father's voice broke. "I didn't know." "But you thought you did," I interrupted, meeting his eyes. "And you used that doubt like a weapon."
Against me.
"For years." He looked away. And for the first time in my life, my mother was silent. Completely, painfully silent. Because there was nothing left to twist. No story left to spin. The truth was in everyone's hands now. And the room that once let them humiliate me now turned on them. Not with violence. With justice. After the family meeting, things were never the same. My parents didn't say a word to me as they left my grandmother's house that day. No apology. No explanation. Just silence and shame trailing behind them like smoke from a fire they could no longer hide. But I didn't need their words. I had the truth. And now, so did everyone else. The ripple effect was immediate. My father, once the proud man of the house, was met with tight-lipped greetings and cold shoulders at every family gathering. No more stories about his glory days. No more command of the room. He had built his entire identity around loyalty and legacy. And now everyone knew he'd failed on both. As for my mother, her smirk was gone, replaced by a brittle, barely holding it together facade. Her social circle, her book clubs, her charity committees, her brunch groups started to shrink. I didn't need to lift a finger. Whispers did the work. She lied about the child. She manipulated the husband. She let her daughter grow up under resentment to protect her own image. Truth has a way of moving fast when it's been caged for too long. At home, the dynamic shifted too. My brothers, who once parroted our parents' indifference, suddenly looked at me like they were seeing a person for the first time. Tara told me that one of them, Nathan, had come to her in private and said, "I think we messed up. We treated her like nothing, and she was carrying all of this alone." I didn't reply. I wasn't interested in guilt without growth. Meanwhile, my grandmother, bless her, became my fiercest advocate. She invited me to every family dinner, bragged about my work, introduced me to her friends as her strongest granddaughter. She even framed a copy of the DNA result and placed it in her study, not to shame anyone, but to remind herself, as she said, of how powerful truth can be when it finally finds daylight. It wasn't revenge, I felt. Not exactly. It was relief. Like I'd finally set down a weight I'd been carrying for years without knowing what it was. But the collapse of their perfect little image didn't stop at reputation. Remember the house I grew up in? The one filled with cold dinners and colder stares? It wasn't even in my father's name. It was inherited from my grandfather, and technically in Grandma's name. She never transferred the deed out of sentimental attachment. But after everything, she changed her will. Tara called me, barely containing her shock. "She's giving you the house." I blinked.
What?
She said she can't, in good faith, leave it to the people who let you suffer under its roof. I didn't ask for it. I never would have. But somehow, the symbolism of it was perfect. The same place where I was cast out like an outsider
Was now mine.
My parents were notified by Grandma's lawyer. They didn't take it well. Apparently, there was screaming. My father tried to argue. My mother threatened to cut off all contact. But here's the thing. You can't threaten someone who's finally free. And I was free, not just of their lies, but of their grip. And watching their world unravel, not by force, but by truth, that was a kind of justice no rage could match. After years of being treated like a footnote in my own story, I was finally writing the chapters myself. The house, my house now, was quiet at first. Not empty. Peaceful. The kind of quiet that doesn't come from absence, but from healing. I kept the kitchen window open most mornings just like my grandmother used to. Sunlight would pour in while I brewed coffee, and sometimes I'd catch my reflection in the glass. Same eyes. Same face. But something was different now. I wasn't flinching anymore. I didn't jump at the sound of raised voices. I didn't walk on eggshells. I didn't shrink to fit into someone else's comfort zone. I took up space. Real space. I started converting the den into a small home office. Bought myself a desk. Painted the walls a soft sage green. On the first shelf, I placed the documents, DNA test, birth records, and hospital bills, not as a reminder of pain, but as proof. You survived this. And not only survived, you rose. With my grandmother's encouragement, I applied to speak at a local women's event. The theme was unspoken truths. I hesitated at first. Public speaking wasn't something I ever saw myself doing, but deep down, I knew this story had power. Not for revenge. For reclamation. So I said yes. I stood on a stage in front of a room filled with strangers, and I told them what it felt like to be raised in a home where you were never fully seen. What it felt like to be gaslit by the people who were supposed to love you most. To have your identity treated like an inconvenience. To carry inherited shame that wasn't even yours. I didn't name names. I didn't have to, but I told them this. Sometimes, survival doesn't look like fighting back. Sometimes, it looks like staying quiet, gathering truth, and choosing the perfect moment to rise. You don't owe anyone your silence, especially when they've used it to hurt you. When I stepped off the stage, women I'd never met hugged me with tears in their eyes. You told my story, one whispered. I realized then, this wasn't just about me. This was bigger. So I started a blog, Blood and Truth. Stories like mine. Stories buried under decades of shame, rewritten and reclaimed. And the comments poured in. Women.
Men.
People from all walks of life who had been told they didn't belong in their own families. I wasn't alone.
And neither were they.
The house became more than a home. It became a space of restoration. A place where cousins would drop by just to sit in the backyard with tea and talk honestly. A place where Grandma would spend Sundays with me, laughing like she'd found something she thought was gone forever. I still passed my parents at family events once in a while.
They didn't speak to me.
They couldn't meet my eyes. But I didn't need their words anymore. I didn't need their approval. I had truth. And truth had given me wings. I wasn't the embarrassment. I wasn't the outsider. I was the storm they didn't see coming, and the calm that came after. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I saw my father again, not at a family event or by accident, but because he showed up. I was in the garden, pulling weeds along the fence line, when I heard the crunch of gravel beneath slow, hesitant footsteps. I looked up. He stood at the gate, envelope in hand, eyes older than I remembered. We hadn't spoken since the day everything came out. No texts. No calls. Just the heavy silence that follows an earthquake. Janelle, he said, like the name had weight he was only now learning to carry. I didn't say anything. Just stood and dusted off my hands. He held up the envelope. I didn't come to fight. I came to give this to you. I took it. Inside was a letter. Handwritten.
Tidy.
No smudges. I believed a lie for most of your life. And when I had the chance to choose love over pride, I chose wrong. I see that now. You didn't deserve what we gave you. You didn't deserve silence, or suspicion, or shame. I don't know if I was your father in blood, but I know now I was never your father in spirit. And I will regret that until the day I die. You didn't break this family, Janelle. You survived it. And that makes you stronger than any son I ever could have wanted. I folded the letter carefully. He didn't ask to come inside. He didn't ask for forgiveness. And that was the first real respect he'd ever shown me. I'm sorry, he said again, quieter this time. I nodded. Not in forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. but in understanding. Thank you for saying it, I replied, voice calm. He nodded, stepped back, and left. Later that evening, I sat with my grandmother on the porch, the sky bleeding into gold and lavender. She watched me, with the kind of pride that doesn't need words. You know what I love most about you, she said, sipping her tea. You never tried to destroy them. You just showed them the mirror. I smiled. Sometimes the mirror is punishment enough. We both laughed softly, because it was true. I could have exposed them to the world, shamed them publicly, but instead, I let the truth do the work. The quiet, patient, undeniable truth. And that truth had already rewritten my legacy. No longer the daughter who didn't belong. I was the one who uncovered the lie. The one who rebuilt something honest from the ashes. The one who didn't need to carry their shame a second longer. That night, I stood in the hallway of the house I once felt so small in, now fully mine. I placed the original DNA envelope and the letter from my father side by side in a shadow box. Not to dwell, but to remember. To honor the girl I was, the one who stood silent for years. And the woman I became, the one who spoke when it mattered most. They had tried to define me by absence. But I became powerful through presence. And the most poetic justice of all? They gave me nothing. Yet I walked away with everything that mattered. My name. My peace. My truth. Still driving that old car? My cousin Leah said it with her nose wrinkled, like she'd smelled something foul. Her brother Tyler snorted. Didn't you inherit a whole business? Guess none of it made it to your garage. Laughter erupted around the dinner table. Aimed at me.
Always at me.
My name is Renee. And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever been underestimated so deeply that your success felt like betrayal to the people who should have celebrated you? I stared down at my plate. Dried chicken, overcooked rice, and humiliation served fresh. It was a family dinner at Aunt Diane's house, and I already regretted showing up. The same house I used to mow the lawn for as a teenager while they sipped lemonade and told me maybe college wasn't for everyone. Now they sat around me in new watches and old mindsets, still convinced that I was the black sheep who never made it out of the dirt. And when Leah made that comment about my car, I just smiled gently and shrugged. It runs fine, I said. She probably doesn't know what a car payment feels like, Tyler added, elbowing his cousin like they were tag-teaming a comedy routine. And maybe they thought I'd bite back. Maybe they wanted me to snap, to lose composure, to prove I was still the outsider. But I didn't, because I had something better than a comeback. Just then, my phone buzzed in my purse. I glanced at it, tapped once, and stood.
Sorry.
I need to take this. They smirked like I was trying to escape the heat. I stepped just outside onto the veranda. The sun was setting in soft gold. I raised the phone to my ear. Yes, I said calmly. My assistant's voice came through crisp and clear. Hi, Renee. Just confirming your jet has landed. They've brought the rolls around and pre-cleared customs. We're ready whenever you are. I turned back toward the open window of the dining room.
And paused.
The silence inside was total. I hadn't meant for them to hear. But I hadn't exactly hidden either. When I walked back in, I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The air had changed. Leah's fork was frozen midair. Tyler blinked like someone had unplugged his brain. Jet, my uncle finally asked, eyes squinting. I just smiled politely and sat back down. Business trip. Early morning. I didn't elaborate. That was the power. Because here's the thing. They thought they knew who I was. That I was the quiet girl with the dusty sedan and hand-me-down handbags. What they didn't know was that I was the CEO of the very company they'd laughed at me for starting. That I owned more real estate than our entire family combined. That the car I drove wasn't because I couldn't afford better. It was because I remembered where I came from and I never wanted to forget. They mocked me for staying grounded. But they were about to learn what it looks like when someone rises in silence. And next, I was going to show them exactly why you never laugh at someone who's still climbing. Because when they reach the top, they remember every word. My cousins always believed that success was inherited, not earned. They grew up in manicured houses with silver spoons and granite countertops. I grew up watching my mom fold diner tips into envelopes labeled rent and electric with the kind of precision that only desperation teaches. My dad disappeared before I turned 7. No note. No warning.
Just gone.
And while my aunt and uncle sent their kids to summer camps and private tennis coaches, I spent my summers babysitting their spoiled children for $4 an hour because, as Aunt Diane once said, it's good for her to learn responsibility. What I learned instead was that love in our family came with conditions. They smiled when you served them, scoffed when you stood on your own. When I was 17, I got into 3 good colleges. Full scholarships. I told the family over dinner one night, heart pounding, eyes sparkling. Leah rolled her eyes.
Wow.
Must be nice when you don't have to pay for it. Uncle Greg added, college doesn't make you successful. It just makes you debt-ridden. My mother was the only one who clapped. Quietly. With tears in her eyes. They mocked me again when I started a company instead of getting a safe job. It was a messy startup, small-scale logistics for minority-owned food suppliers. Not sexy. Not flashy. Definitely not respectable enough for family barbecues. Tyler laughed when he saw me making deliveries myself. You? Running a business? Thought you were going to be the next Oprah, not UPS. Leah once said, it's kind of embarrassing, isn't it? Like playing entrepreneur? But I kept working. Nights, weekends, holidays. I reinvested every penny. I lived in a studio apartment that was half storage closet. Ate ramen. Lost sleep.
Gained grit.
My mother passed just before I turned 26. Heart failure. Years of overwork and stress finally caught up. She never saw my first warehouse open. But she did leave me a note I found tucked inside her recipe book. They won't see you coming, baby. And when they do, it'll be too late to catch up. I built the company in her name. Emmy Freight Solutions. Her initials. Her legacy. And in 2 years, I turned it into a multi-million-dollar logistics empire. Private fleet. Global contracts. 27 employees.
But I didn't tell the family.
Why would I? They had already decided who I was. The girl with a sad backstory, a used car, and unrealistic dreams. I let them believe it. Let them joke. Let them gawk at my old Corolla with peeling paint and a squeaky window. Because to them, that car was proof I hadn't made it.
But to me,
that car was the steering wheel I gripped every night when I cried behind the wheel after 14-hour shifts. It was the front seat where I'd read my mother's note over and over. It was the one constant reminder that I was still moving forward, even when it felt like the world was driving past me. They saw rust. I saw roots. And when that assistance call came through at dinner, it wasn't a flex. It was a reminder that I didn't owe them explanations, just consequences. After that dinner, everything shifted. Not for me, I was already living in my truth, but for them. My cousins, my aunt, my uncle, suddenly they were curious. I'd spent years being invisible in this family.
But now?
I was a headline they couldn't stop clicking. 3 days after the dinner, Leah sent me a message on Instagram. Hey girl. Didn't know you were flying private these days, LOL. Smiling face with heart eyes, we should totally catch up. Tyler posted a story the same day. A boomerang of him holding a cup of espresso at some pop-up cafe with the caption, Grind time briefcase, manifesting boss vibes fire. He'd never posted about work before. That's when it hit me. It wasn't the jet that shook them. It was the fact that I'd passed them by and never told them. I wasn't bragging. I wasn't flashing my wealth. I wasn't begging for validation. And that silence made them desperate to know more. They had lived their entire lives believing wealth meant power and power meant control. That they were the standard to be measured by. But I'd walked right past them, quietly, completely, and they hadn't seen it coming.
So now?
They were scrambling. And then something happened that confirmed just how much it was eating at them. I got a call from a supplier who'd referred me to a new client. A boutique grocer in another city. Great lead. But the conversation took a strange turn. The manager said, One of your cousins? I think his name was Tyler?
He reached out to us last week.
Said you recommended him. But his numbers were off. And he couldn't explain how his logistics worked. I froze. Tyler was trying to use my name. I thanked the manager, hung up, and sat there for a long minute. He didn't congratulate me. He didn't apologize for mocking me. He didn't even ask me directly. He just tried to steal a piece of what I'd built and hoped I wouldn't find out. But I did. And it didn't stop there. Over the next week, 2 more people messaged me about family members name-dropping me freight. Leah had apparently pitched a fake consulting service to a local boutique using my company's portfolio as her past experience. She was presenting my warehouses, my deliveries, my hard work as hers. That's when it stopped being annoying and became personal. They hadn't just dismissed me. They were now trying to cash in on the image they once laughed at. The girl they called a failure? Now, suddenly, she was their golden ticket. But they'd forgotten something important. You can't steal from someone who's already 2 steps ahead. So I started tracking everything. Screenshots, emails, voice notes, fake invoices. Not to retaliate.
To prepare.
Because I knew exactly how this story ended. They wanted to wear my success like a costume. But I was about to show them the price of pretending to be someone you once tried to bury. They played small games. I was about to make a big move. And the only thing better than rising is rising while they're still trying to figure out how you did it. I could have called them out publicly. Could have embarrassed them the way they tried to embarrass me all my life. But that would have given them something they didn't deserve. Attention. Instead, I chose something quieter, sharper, more permanent. First, I called my legal team. Me Freight had a small but powerful legal department. 2 brilliant women who had seen this kind of thing before. I laid it all out. The name-dropping, the fake pitches, the way Leah and Tyler were using our brand to sell themselves to clients.
My team moved fast.
Cease and desist letters were drafted within hours. But I didn't send them.
Not yet.
I wanted to watch them dig deeper first. So I played dumb. I replied to Leah's Instagram message. Sure. We should catch up soon. Let me know when you're free. She bit instantly. Within a day, she invited me to coffee. Just us girls. We met at a trendy cafe, where she wore designer shades and talked like we were old friends who hadn't been emotionally distant for 2 decades. She asked questions. Too many. So, what's your average profit margin? What kind of software do you use for scheduling? Are your trucks diesel or hybrid? Just curious. I smiled through all of it, gave vague answers, watched her brain spin behind her fake lashes. Then she said it. Tyler and I are thinking of starting something similar. You'd be so proud. We even mocked up a little proposal. Wanna see? She handed me her phone. There it was, my logo, my trucks, even a photo of one of my warehouses. Photoshopped into a mock pitch deck with her name on the cover. I looked up, stunned at her audacity. She mistook it for awe. I left that meeting with everything I needed. That night, I sent the cease and desist notices to both of them. Certified mail. Legal headers. Real consequences. I didn't write them myself, but if I had, they would have started with, "You should have thought twice before mocking the woman whose playbook you're now trying to plagiarize." The next day, I filed formal trademark infringement notices. My company's brand, its name, even the color palette, fully protected. Their fake documents were now grounds for action. But the most satisfying piece of the puzzle? I called the boutique grocer Leah had pitched, and I booked them myself. Offered them better rates,
Quicker turnaround.
a dedicated liaison. They signed the contract within 48 hours. Leah lost her fake client before she even got started. Tyler's story unraveled just as quickly. A partner he'd tried to rope in for a new delivery startup backed out the moment he got the legal notice. His rep was burned before the website even went live. The cousins who once laughed at my rusted car now had to sit in rooms and explain how they'd impersonated the very woman they once called embarrassing. And me? I said nothing.
Didn't post about it.
Didn't gloat. Because real power doesn't shout. It moves quietly, like a tide rising while they're still building castles in the sand. And when it hits, they drown in their own disbelief. They tried to copy the brand. But I am the brand. And this was only the beginning. By the time the legal notices reached their doors, the group chat exploded. I wasn't in it Obviously, never had been. But my cousin Tara, the only one with a conscience, sent me screenshots. The panic in their texts was everything I expected and more. Tyler. Bro, is she serious? We're family. Leah. She didn't have to go nuclear. It was just a mock-up.
Tara.
Y'all literally tried to steal her company's image. She just protected her work, like any boss would. They weren't mad because I embarrassed them. They were mad because I didn't warn them. Because I didn't play the role I was born into, the quiet, grateful girl from the struggling branch of the family tree. The one who took jokes and served casseroles and kept her head down. They didn't expect me to fight back. And they never expected me to win. Tyler tried damage control first. He emailed me, full of typos and backpedaling. Hey, cuz, total misunderstanding on the whole logistics thing. Just experimenting with a few ideas. Didn't mean any harm. Hope we can just forget this. I replied once. Thanks for reaching out. My legal team will take it from here. All the best. No smiley face. No warmth. Just corporate precision. Leah went silent. Not a single word. But a week later, I heard through the grapevine she'd canceled a brunch business meeting with 3 boutique owners because her name was now flagged for misrepresentation.
One of them was my client now.
Meanwhile, my actual business? Thriving. Our expansion was ahead of schedule. I just signed a deal with a luxury food brand for a 5-year transport partnership. I was speaking at 2 conferences that fall, one about women-led entrepreneurship, the other about corporate identity theft and how to protect your brand. Irony? Delicious. But the final blow didn't come from me. It came from my grandmother. She called a family dinner. Another one. Same long table. Same forced smiles. I almost didn't go. But something told me this one would be different. When I walked in, I noticed the energy immediately. Quieter. Uneasy. Grandma stood at the head of the table with her cane, and as soon as everyone was seated, she spoke. I want to say something, she said. About Renee. You could hear a pin drop. She started with nothing. She buried her mother too young. And not one of you helped her when she was working double shifts and building something from the ground up. No one looked at me. I heard how some of you laughed. I saw how you talked down to her. And now you want pieces of what she built? You're not family. You're opportunists. Leah turned red. Tyler shifted uncomfortably. And let me be clear, Grandma added. The next time I hear anyone mock her or try to steal from her again, you won't be invited back to this table. Silence.
Tense. Burning.
Beautiful. I didn't say a word that night.
I didn't need to.
Because everything they thought I wasn't, powerful, respected, untouchable, was sitting right in front of them. They used to think I didn't belong at that table.
But now?
I owned the table. And the room knew it. After Grandma's speech, the shift became permanent. Tyler stopped showing up to family events. His pride couldn't handle the spotlight turning away from him. Leah, on the other hand, kept coming, but the glint in her eye was gone. She barely spoke to me, and when she did, her voice was tight, controlled. Like she knew that one wrong word might crack the last shred of dignity she had left. But the fallout didn't stop with them. Their parents, my aunt and uncle, began to feel it too. Clients in their small real estate business started pulling out. A few cited brand confusion after seeing Leah's fake proposals floating around online. Word travels fast in tight professional circles. And in our community, reputation is currency. They tried to spin it, of course. Claimed they were restructuring or focusing on family more. But the truth leaked out in whispers and side eyes. They used Renee's company logo, tried to pass off her fleet as their own. After mocking her for years? It wasn't just embarrassing. It was pathetic. I stayed silent. I posted nothing, said nothing. But the irony echoed through every interaction. At events, people gravitated toward me, not them. At church, people whispered praises about how far I'd come. Even the cousins who used to ignore me now smiled a little too brightly and asked, "So, how's business?" They weren't curious. They were terrified of being next. And Tyler? He finally reached out again. But this time, it wasn't an email. It was a typed letter on actual paper, dropped off at the front desk of my company headquarters.
Renee?
I messed up. Big time. I let my ego convince me I could fake what you built. And now everything I was building is gone before it even started. I'm sorry I ever laughed at you. If you ever need anything, I owe you. Big time.
T.
I read it once, then folded it, and filed it away in a drawer labeled unpaid debts. Because I didn't need his apology to heal. The collapse was never about revenge. I didn't need to burn anything down. I just needed to stand. And the second I did, they began to sink in the hole they dug for me. Meanwhile, my own life bloomed. I opened a second headquarters in Atlanta, hired more women into leadership, launched a mentorship program for young entrepreneurs from underserved communities, kids like I used to be. And every time I got in my old car, that little beat-up Corolla, I smiled. I still drove it. Not out of necessity, out of principle. Because the engine that once carried me through sleepless nights still ran like it had something to prove. Just like me. So while they scrambled to rebuild what they never really had, I expanded in silence. One contract at a time. One flight at a time. One legacy at a time.
And they?
They were stuck where they started. Mocking shadows. Watching the girl they underestimated become the woman they couldn't reach. 6 months later, I stood in the hangar beside my private jet as the wind whipped through my coat and my assistant checked her clipboard with precision. Across the tarmac, a team of new hires unloaded product samples headed to our partners overseas. From a beat-up Corolla to a fleet of trucks and air freight?
Yeah.
We had come a long way, but my rise wasn't built on revenge. It was built on memory. I remembered the nights my mother cried silently at the kitchen table when rent was due. I remembered the pitying looks from family as I poured punch at their parties, knowing full well I was there to serve, not belong. I remembered every eye roll, every "still driving that thing?" jab, every dismissal that turned my silence into fuel.
And now?
I had carved a life from that silence. Not loud, not flashy, just solid. My logistics company had surpassed $20 million in contracts. We'd expanded into South America, developed eco-friendly transport solutions, and partnered with 2 international nonprofit orgs to ship medical supplies to disaster zones, at cost. Impact. Legacy. Not just profit. Meanwhile, the house I lived in now, paid in full.
It wasn't a mansion by choice.
3 bedrooms, full garden, custom kitchen design from scratch.
Warm.
Quiet.
Mine.
But the most important place in that house? The wall in my home office. One photo, framed in gold. Me and my mother, standing beside that old Corolla, both of us laughing. She was holding a manila envelope labeled incorporation papers. She never lived to see the company take off. But she saw the beginning. And that's what mattered. Once a month, I host a dinner. Not for family. For the women I mentor. Young, fierce, underestimated women who remind me of myself at 19. They come with ideas, notebooks, nervous laughs. I watch them closely, how they talk about their dreams with disclaimers, like they've been told to be realistic too many times. And I tell them the same thing every time. They'll laugh at your rust. They'll roll their eyes at your silence. But when your jet lands, they'll pretend they were cheering all along. At one of those dinners, Tara, my one cousin who never turned her back, pulled me aside.
You know, she said, they still talk about you.
Whisper your name like a warning. I smiled.
Good, I said.
Because I wasn't their cautionary tale anymore. I was the consequence. And as I sipped my wine that night, surrounded by laughter, hope, and the hum of futures being built, I realized something. Success isn't just measured in dollars. It's measured in who you lift with you, in how you rise without stomping and teach others how to climb. They tried to mock me into silence. Instead, they watched me turn that silence into a platform. And now, they're still sitting at that dinner table, while I'm rewriting the menu. A year to the day after that infamous family dinner, and Diane hosted another one. Same table, same roast chicken, same crystal glasses clinking under dim lighting. But this time, I didn't sit at the far end, waiting to be acknowledged. I wasn't even planning to go. I had a ticket booked for Tokyo, business class, Not private jet this time. I liked to remind myself what it felt like to move among people instead of above them. But Grandma called the night before.
Come.
Not for them. For me.
So I did.
I wore the same coat they once called plain. Minimal makeup. No jewelry. Just me, still and solid. When I walked in, the room stilled. Leah glanced up from her phone. Tyler looked down at his plate. Uncle Greg offered a stiff nod. Aunt Diane tried her usual smile. Look who made it. I smiled back, gentle but unreadable. We ate in near silence. No one mocked my car. No one asked about my business. But not out of respect. Out of fear. Because they knew I wasn't the story anymore. I was the ending. After dessert, Grandma stood. I just want to say something, she said, voice trembling but proud. A year ago, someone at this table made a joke. A joke they thought was harmless. About an old car. About a young woman. And today, that woman has done more for this family's name than anyone here. Everyone went still.
She turned to me.
Renee, I'm proud of you. Not because you're rich, but because you remembered who you were when they tried to make you forget. I blinked back tears. And for the first time in a long time, I felt seen. After dinner, I walked to the driveway. My old Corolla still parked right where I left it. A dent near the back, faded hood, engine still humming like a fighter. Leah passed me on her way out. She looked at the car, then at me. You still driving that thing? She asked, no laughter this time. Just genuine disbelief. I turned slowly. No, I said. She blinked. I choose to drive it. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came. I got into the driver's seat, rolled the window down. You mocked me for staying grounded, I said softly. But you know what the sky teaches you when you fly alone? She stayed silent. That not everyone deserves to rise with you. Then I drove off. And as I turned the corner, I felt a strange peace. Because I hadn't destroyed them. I didn't need to. They were living in the ruins of their own arrogance.
While I
was flying. Not because of spite, but because I built wings from the very rust they laughed at. They mocked the car. But the car never broke down. I didn't either. And the silence that followed my takeoff was the sound of them realizing they never saw the driver coming.